Okay, so our actually last talk for today is by Andrej Shadura on building an entire Debian derivative from Git. Welcome.
Hello. Just a bit about myself. I've been using Debian for nearly 15 years now, I guess so. Yeah, and I've been a contributor for some of the time, well, most of the time, and Debian developer for more than 6 years now. And I work for Collabora, which is a company doing open source consultancy, and we do lots of interesting things with Linux and related technologies, and one of them is building distributions. And some of those distributions are based on Debian, and we actually prefer distributions based on Debian to some other things. We have some project with Open Embedded and others, but well, Debian-based ones are slightly better in lots of ways. So, one of the things I personally had to work with recently and still work in progress, and I'm going to talk about it, is moving basically building bits of Debian derivative from Git without having Debian source packages as the original source. So distribution I'm talking about is Apertis. It is a Debian derivative, originally based actually on Ubuntu, but we've since January till April this year we've done horribly monumental work of moving it to Debian, because there is no reason to use Ubuntu anymore for the base of the derivative. It's a distribution which is made for use in car industry. Originally, it was meant to be used for basically the board computer with navigation and radio and all other things. These days, it's more for more deeply hidden bits of computing in a car and car-related devices. This is basically an overview of infrastructure involved in Apertis. Interesting things for the purpose of this presentation are the code hosting bit, which is at the moment it is GitLab. We used to have a bunch of custom cgit instances, and we've migrated from that to GitLab. And another key bit here is Open Build Service, which builds actual binary packages of the source packages, the same source package format as in Debian. And well, later those binary packages get used to build images and well, all other interesting things. So OBS, some people here I guess know about what it is. For rest of you I will tell in a moment. So OBS is a web service which does basically what Debian build infrastructure does, plus it is hosting for Debian and other source packages. So it can build binary packages all out of Debian sources, spec files, and lots of other things for lots of different distributions. So some people use it, for example, to build binary packages in various formats like RPM, Deb, and so on from their upstream tarballs. Because OpenSUSE, which develops this piece of software, they provide access to the publicly hosted instance. So for the purpose of Apertis, important things is that just as S-build, it builds things in clean truths. So it populates a truth of the current versions of the packages every time a package gets built. It does it in a different way than S-build does, because you need to manually tell it what packages you want in the truth. It doesn't follow the essential bits in the Debian packages, for example. It has branching tools, which is really great because you can make some modifications, test build them, see whether they can actually work, download them, install it on your system, test them locally, and send them for review, which it also supports. It supports reviews. It's like a really cool thing. But it was the good thing about OBS. And now the bad thing about OBS. So the versioning system, internally, if you look at it, it resembles Git, because it stores binary blobs, it hashes them using SHA-256 or something, and it references those internal hashes everywhere. And the backend is written in Perl, which is, and not in a good way of saying Perl. It implements a custom database in text files, which references those blob hashes, which is sort of a good thing, but the way it is done, it's not very good. So I guess it needs a major rewrite, but that's out of scope of this presentation. In any case, the the version control interface really resembles Subversion. Even the status messages and error messages are very similar. So I was assuming initially that it actually uses SVN internally to store things, but no. So branching in OBS is actually copying without preservation of history, unlike in Subversion. So if each quarter we create a new branch of Apertis, a new future release. Each time we do that, we basically copy all packages into a new project, and as we do that, all history is gone. So, well, this is the ugly bit. On this screenshot, you can see the revision log of a package called base files, which is imported from Debian with some things on top of it. So as you can see, I've made 3 uploads. Basically, well, I uploaded something, and then I realized, oh, I've actually uploaded a broken package. I uploaded it again, and then realized something else was also missing, so I uploaded it the 3rd time. It's totally fine. You can upload package as many, the same package version as many times you like, and as long as it hasn't been built and used elsewhere, it's still going to be. You still have a chance to fix the errors you've introduced. So at the very beginning, as you can see, the admin has branched this distribution from elsewhere, and this is the first entry in the history, it seems. There's a button, show all. So what happens if I press show all? Absolutely nothing. Nothing changes. It shows only the same bit of history. If you have deleted the original project from which this was branched, you're never going to retrieve the rest of the history. Review tools. This is how one of those bits of history looks like. It compares one change file with another change file, and DSC with another DSC, and sometimes, but not all the times, it shows you the difference inside the Debian tarball, but sometimes it doesn't. So in most cases it doesn't, to be honest. So the review process is a bit. It's better than nothing, but it's not really suitable for proper code review. So why not use Git? Indeed, why? Debian. We have so many Git workflows, and all of them are correct at the same time. Basically, it's not a very good thing for the purpose of creating a derivative distribution which would be able to pull all of those Git histories and reuse them. So, even when those workflows have been followed according to the letter of workflow of the law, they're not always consistent. People tend to commit things like git ignore, Debian local source options, which are not getting into the actual source packages, and or just people tend to forget files in the Git repository as long as they get cleaned during the build. Git, contrary to most of other workflows, it prevents that by being very, very opinionated about what you actually push. And even, for many people, unfortunately, it doesn't support the workflows you like, because, you need to teach it. And to teach it a new workflow, you basically have to be Ian Jackson or as someone else who is involved with the upstream. And sometimes you will have a hard time convincing Ian to add a new workflow which may be broken in his view. Anyway, so the Git solves this problem but it is used by a minority of people. So you usually, even when you use the Git in your package yourself, there's no guarantee that tomorrow someone is going to fix a release critical bug while you are being at MiniDebConf in Hamburg and you just don't care at that moment. And they upload something not using the Git. And this change won't be available in the Git immediately. It sort of, when you do the Git fetch, probably it will be created, this Git change, but it won't be in the Git itself. Yeah, so yeah, and probably some people still use all other version control systems, even though we don't host them anymore in Debian, but still they can somewhere else on SourceForge or somewhere, I don't know. Yeah, so Apertis already actually uses Git, but just for a bunch of packages. It's mostly a Git build package with patches not applied /deb14 style, with some minor differences, because for some packages we are actually an upstream and we want to avoid extra work, so we keep Debian directory. Well, we just have one branch and multiple tags conforming to the GBP expectations, but there are some changes, minor changes. So most of the Apertis packages are not in Git, or well, were not in Git before this work started. So for those who don't know what deb14 is, I will show a little bit of it on the next slide. So basically it takes what Git build package already supports and adds some features for supporting multiple upstream releases, multiple upstream branches, Debian releases, derivatives. And unfortunately, not as many people as I would like use it. I also don't use it all the time, because sometimes it's easier to just use the GBP defaults and not modify them, because you would need to ship a new file in Debian directory. You need to write it from scratch usually, or copy it from somewhere else. Anyway, so this is what deb14 more or less looks like. Oh, it's got cut off a bit. Yeah, so you've got a branch for upstream sources where they basically are unpacked as they are in the Git repository. And you've got branches, it's got, anyway, it was supposed to be a bit smaller. Yeah, maybe, no. Anyway, so Debian changes are applied on top of the upstream branch, and they are put in a separate branch called Debian master. And each time you import a new upstream release, you merge it onto Debian master, you do new changes, and you tag a new release. I will need to change the slide for the final version of the presentation. Yeah, so this is just so wrong. So in Apertis, we are using slightly different version of this workflow. So there is well, we will be using, because until this point we were using it inconsistently and just for some packages, and this will be used more globally. So we still preserve the upstream latest branch. We use Debian/release branches where sometimes we want packages not from the current release, but from a previous release or from experimental. In that case, we only take this branch and name it according to the release we take the packages from. And on top of that branch, sometimes we add our own changes. Well, we prefix or suffix the versions with CO, which means collabor, obviously, and the number of the change. So until now, those changes were basically only I'll come to it a bit later. So there's an issue with upstream tarballs. We need to store them somewhere if we want to completely get rid of classic Debian source packages. But well, Git is not very suitable for keeping upstream tarballs. So there's a tool called pristine-tar, which recreates upstream tarballs from a upstream branch. Well, branch having upstream sources. It creates a tarball from Git, and then it applies some magic to using some binary delta to recreate the exact copy of the original tarball with all of the checksums matching on all of that stuff. So it ships an outdated version of SUSE bzip 2 and ships a slightly differently outdated version of bzip 2, and also it ships a zlib, literally quoting from the documentation, zlib-based gzip that is heavily based on NetBSD zip. And this is from the man page of this tool, Frankenstein compressor. An unholy combination of multiple zip programs that suppose arbitrary file name, blah, blah. It's not very maintainable, and it often fails, especially it fails when a tar changes underneath. Holger's laughing, I guess he's run into those issues with reproducible builds, probably, because pristine-tar is not reproducible very much. Sometimes it is, but often it is not. Yeah, so it's wonderful, it's magical, and it often breaks, and it's best to stay away from it, and it's not a good idea to base a workflow for the whole distribution on it. And with XZ, it only makes the situation worse, because XZ, by its design, it's not guaranteed to produce the same bit stream on the output given the same input bit stream or byte stream. So instead of pristine-tar, we decided to use Git LFS, which solves the problem completely by storing the files just as they are, separately from Git, but at the same time on the same infrastructure. So there's no need to fight all of those multiple zip versions, XZ, which is a whole new beast, and it's supported by GitLab natively, which you already use. And even if it weren't, the protocol is quite simple and it's easy to re-implement. And in fact, I just, in my free time, I started re-implementing it in Python just for fun. It's doable. I've written a tool which replaces pristine-tar and has almost the same command line interface. It will ultimately have the same command line interface, while ignoring unnecessary options and accepting all of them basically existing. At the moment, it's still not complete and still has some bugs, but it works, even though it is a working prototype, as I call it. And underneath, it uses the reference LFS implementation. The idea is that we, just as with pristine-tar, we create a new branch and we commit metadata to this branch. But the metadata is not X-Delta files, but it is Git LFS textual metadata, which is really simple. It basically stores the hash of the file and the size of it, and the file is stored on the Git LFS infrastructure. If you check out this branch, you will magically get all of the tarballs ever committed to Git LFS. They will all be downloaded, and you'll see them. It's best not to check it out, but if you've got a long history of committing tarballs, the tool I've written, it works this around because it directly looks at the branch, it finds the metadata file, and it requests just that one file from Git LFS and checks it out in a directory of your choice. Well, I think it's the current directory by default. So, but if for some reason this tool doesn't work, you can still, even with normal Git LFS tools, you can just get one file, but by default you get all of them, because otherwise it would be very difficult to figure out what tarballs are actually stored in on this branch, because you would need to traverse the history back in time and see what's committed there, or use tags or something else. It's just not beautiful enough. So this is how dash looks in Apertis. So there's one more thing which you can see here. So we've got two tags with this exactly same version. The difference between them is a GitLab CI file. So the idea is that GitLab CI is used to generate the source package files out of the Git branch. So in case of dash, we have no changes, so this is the only change. Unfortunately, GitLab doesn't allow you to avoid this thing and globally set configuration for CI. And it's been a bug, upstream bug, for a very long time, and there's no work on this happening, but I hope one day it gets fixed and this delta won't be needed. So for base files, it's slightly different because we still use an older version of base files. So, and there's no upstream as such, because it's a native package, so there's only Debian buster and Apertis something branch with tags. We've got a package called tar gplv2 because the users of Apertis, they usually don't want gplv3 because of in the target devices. Elsewhere is fine, but not on the device itself, which is in the car because of regulations which basically tell you that you cannot allow users to modify, well, the software of the car in some important bits, and well, they might get issues with getting this certified. So we still keep tar GPL v3, which is an old version of tar with some patches applied. So in this case, it's more complicated than that. It's basically, we don't have a Debian branch because there's no Debian upstream anymore, because Debian doesn't ship GPL v3 tar. And there are some changes we have, and as you can see, there are two tarballs, 1.16, which is the last GPL v3 tar from Debian, and the next one, which was never in Debian at all. And you can basically go to any of those Apertis tags, and you can, there's a script which checks out the tarball into the ... directory, and you can build the package just with the same, well, if you use the Debian tag, basically you will get exactly the same DSC as, well, source package as in Debian, except the GPG signature, which we cannot reproduce, obviously. So this is how this thing works. There's a Debian CI pipeline, which, well, pipeline is a really, like, a strong word because it's just one step in the pipeline and a very long script at the moment. So the script checks out the tag it was pointed at, or a branch if there is no tag, gets the tarball from LFS, installs build dependencies because lots of packages, they need things like, for example, GNOME packages, they usually generate control in, and they also need some GNOME tools for that. So you need sometimes to install build dependencies, even if you're building just the source package. So it builds the source package. If the source package is being built not from a tag, but just a untagged commit, it also modifies the latest changelog entry, adding a tilde to it, so that you can see clearly that it's a snapshot. The source package is being published as an artifact in GitLab, so you can still download it within like 2 weeks or something. And if it's a released version, so if it's got a tag, it uploads it to a special section of the OBS where only snapshots are being kept, and then, well, other developers of the project can review the change and merge it to the main section. So it's still a work in progress. I guess in what, a month and something in Curitiba, I will be presenting a more complete version of the same talk. We are still importing packages. We just imported like core packages of Apertis. There are still bugs being found in tools. So this thing about build dependencies, it eats quite a lot of processing power to install them, and well, also not just processing power, but bandwidth and other things. So we might try to find some other more optimized workflow a bit later when we get basic things running. Yes, this issue with GitLab needing the YAML file in a specific location, which cannot be remote outside of the repo. We try to find a workaround for it, but at the moment, both workarounds involve changes in GitLab. Well, AutoDevOps is one of them. It's some sort of like assumed configuration for CI, but it's you cannot change it from a user interface. It's pre-built with GitLab, and you have to patch GitLab to change the YAML file being used for AutoDevOps feature. So Debian is unlikely going to have all packages in Git anytime soon, because we still have lots of people who don't use Git, don't like Git, and so on. I hope that one day the LFS bit I've described is going to replace pristine-tar completely, and because I don't think many people are going to host Debian packages, well, packaging for software in Debian outside of Salsa. Well, maybe GitHub, but it also supports LFS. I don't think many people keep them on custom Git servers. I know some people do, but not many. But for that, I need to write some Git build package integration, which doesn't exist at the moment. So there's still lots of things to be done, but I hope we can integrate some of those things back in Debian. And well, that's it for now. Come to the same talk in Curitiba if you want to know more. because there will be more stuff. And that's it.
Thanks, Andrew. Is there any questions? Please come to the microphone.
In the overview graph in the beginning, you had some Jenkins box there. Did you try that to do the build automation? Because that doesn't need the internal file.
The answer to that is yes. The original Git workflow was based on Jenkins. Unfortunately, Jenkins has quite a lot of, well, let's call deficiencies. And maybe it's partly the way we implemented it. Maybe it's something to do with Jenkins itself, how it works. But rather than fixing the Jenkins workflow, which is still being used for packages where we are the upstream, we decided to go with GitLab because, well, in this case, GitLab is more integrated with, you immediately see when you upload something that, okay, this broke basically for some reason. We're also going to have some actual CI slapped on top of this source package generation. So we're going to have not just source packages, but also an actual CI. There's also another way of implementing what I was showing, because OBS actually supports remote package storage instead of using the internal version control system. But it's more difficult to implement. Playing with GitLab CI gives us the result very quickly, unlike that one. And the code that I already have, they have some Git remotes for Debian packages. It's very, very basic, and it doesn't work for us. So yeah, Jenkins could work, but it's a lot of work, and also, have I stitched it off? No. Well, there are issues basically with it.
Yeah, and the other bit is I'm using OBS for building RPM packages because that's really what it's meant for. And I was looking at the Debian support and ran away screaming because it's absolutely horrible, I think. The way, maybe I was looking at it wrongly, but it's tracking the changes files, including the checksums in there and stuff. It absolutely didn't look like any Debian workflow, so I was quite surprised to see that you're actually using it because it looks,
well,
it looked absolutely unusable.
Well, there are two issues. First of all, we are using a slightly patched version of OBS, so there are some changes we maintain, which are unfortunately not in the upstream yet. Second thing is well, they are not very significant. It's basically just some small tuning. Maybe some of it has been upstreamed already because it's not me who works on OBS. There are other people like Andrew Lee and Lucas Kanashiro. So unfortunately, the OBS people, they find Debian workflows really bad. That's the opinion of, I guess, at least some people working on the upstream in OBS. And the wiki page on building Debian packages in OBS, it was describing completely different workflow with like RPM spec-like thing, which was generating internally the source packages for Debian and not using the traditional workflow. So I guess you may have found the wiki page which describes, or some document which describes that workflow, which is, I find it horrible, to be honest. Yeah, with templating and things, substitutions, like spec files basically, but for Debian, and well,
just worse.
Yeah, just worse. Yeah. Because spec file is just one, and there are like dozen files. Yeah, so it also supports more Debian-like workflow, just not very immediately obvious. I can show you later after the talk.
Any more questions? Holger, did you have a question? Well then, check the microphone.
I checked whether pristine-Lfs is packaged for Debian.
It is, as I said, it is currently a working prototype. So I will package it for Debian when I tag the first release, because currently the release is 2019 till the pre, and that's not very suitable for. Well, I was doing last-minute changes before importing packages last week, and there were quite a few of them. There were issues with importing some of the trees. So when I get it finally ready, I will package it for Debian, and well, yeah.
Because it looks yeah, amazing.
So any more questions?
You said people will start using Git LFS because they're using Salsa. I didn't understand why that was a connection requirement. Doesn't it come easy on its own?
Well, it's not a requirement, but before we had Salsa, we didn't have any Git LFS server-side instance anywhere on Debian infrastructure. So you could use it elsewhere, but not within the Debian reach of Debian, basically. And with GitLab, it is enabled, installed, well, enabled by default, I guess, maybe. Well, but it's supported within GitLab, so you don't have to do any, you don't have to put any effort in setting it up.
Right, so pristine-tar doesn't need a server-side thing, but Git LFS does?
Well,
or
yeah, yes.
Right, okay.
Any further questions? I don't see any questions from the IRC, so let's thank you again.